Chapter 9. The Sports Festival. Legion. The Sports Festival. Balance is found in the one who faces his guilt. The class was utterly surprised at the mob of students that appeared at their door. Who are all you guys? The students were perplexed and more than wary. A few had even subconsciously taken battle stances. Izuku looked around the classroom. He noticed that Kyoka's earjacks were twitching, and Kirishima's sleeves looked tighter around his arms. Shiro had his elbow faced forward. Not that it would do much under the blazer. They're all subconsciously reacting. This crowd isn't good for them. What business do you have with Class A? Tenya asked, his arm chopping wildly. The boy had fortunately recovered quickly from overtaxing his engines to the point of blowing them out. Izuku had, once he heard of Tenya's injury, all but ordered for Tenya to go into the back-to-pod, the miraculous device helping heal his legs and give him the energy needed for Recovery Girl to use her quirk. His brother, Ingenium, had pulled Izuku to the side after the funeral to thank him alongside Tenya's parents. He had simply nodded and left, saying that it was what friends did. We can't get out. Mineta cried as he absent-mindedly scratched his head, slightly tugging at the balls. Izuku stood up. He paused as Bakugo started walking towards the door. They're checking out the competition, Grape Stain. Mineta choked at the remark, but held his tongue as Izuku glanced at him, shaking his head. We're the ones that made it out of the villain attack. Testing the waters for the sports festival, he said as he stopped right in front of the other students. There's no point. He smirked. So get the hell out of my way, extras. The students gasped, and Tenya immediately reprimanded him, telling him to stop calling people extras just because he didn't know them. Izuku merely sighed and pinched the bridge of his nose, already fed up with Bakugo's crap. He's going to make an enemy for all of us if he keeps this up. Then they heard a new voice. I came to see what the famous Class A was like, but you seem pretty arrogant. A new guy walked through the crowd and made his way to the front. He looked tired, extremely so, and had a wild mane of purple hair. Exactly as I thought. Sorry about him, he's an idiot. Izuku interrupted as Bakugo growled. Izuku merely glared at him, and the boy huffed. Anyway, I'm 1A's president. What can I help you with? The other teen raised a brow. And here I thought that all of the class was like him. The rest of the class quickly shook their heads in denial, and Bakugo growled again. The teen raised his arm behind his head and looked at Izuku's equally dead eyes. There are quite a few people who enrolled into general studies or other courses because they didn't make it into the hero course. Did you know that? Izuku closed his eyes and nodded. I imagine so, and he asks? The school's given us a chance. If we do well enough in the sports festival, we can get transferred into the hero course. Of course, that means that they'd have to transfer people out. At that, the class as a whole tensed, some of them getting closer to one another. A few even glaring. Checking out the competition, he quoted. I'm here to tell you that even if you are hero course students, if you're not careful, I'll swoop right in and take your place. He dropped his arm and stared at them all. I came with a declaration of war. Many of the students found him extremely bold. Izuku merely snorted, a slight chuckle coming out of his mouth. The act surprised them all. Is this how the rest of you feel? He asked with a sweep of his hand, gesturing at all of them. The students around the purple-haired boy, all of whom had been inspired by his words, started to mutter and nod vigorously. Izuku chuckled again and snarled. Get out of our way. We have no time to deal with children. The students gasped and some started to curse him. Meanwhile, one started to ask why he would say something like that. Izuku and the other boy glared at each other. Even Bakugo was shocked at the declaration. Hey! Another voice cried out. This time another boy with silver hair and the strangest eyebrows barged in through the crowd. I'm from Class B next door. I heard you fought villains and came to hear about it. Don't get so full of yourselves. Especially you. Green Mop. Izuku glared at the new boy that interrupted and was about to speak when even another voice interrupted. Now, Tetsu-kun. There's no need to antagonize our rivals this early on. Something about the new kid's voice immediately grated on Izuku's already frayed nerves. After all, we'll have plenty of time to prove Class B's superiority during the sports festival. The new boy was blond with dark eyes full of mischief and arrogance. What now? Although, I am surprised to hear that Class A's president to be such a foul person, especially after what we heard from our own beloved President Kindo. He walked closer to the group, the crowd parting for him slightly as he extended his hands dramatically. Is he serious? I'd recognize that face, however. After all, we see it so often now, even under all those helmets. Couldn't help yourself, could you? Offering your clones as security forces to the school. Why, I'd be surprised if they even let you participate in the festival. It might be considered a conflict of interest. Izuku narrowed his eyes. The guy was annoying, but he made a good point. He'd have to talk to Nizu or All Might about it. Of course, it's also hard to not recognize that face. After all, we see it every morning when we walk through the main entrance at that memorial. Can't forget the news too. What was his name again? Django? Izuku stiffened, and the rest of the class sucked in a breath at the boy's audacity. Izuku cracked his neck, and his hands turned to fists. You better choose your next words carefully, he whispered. I'm just saying, why would UA go through all the trouble? A memorial? A funeral? All for what? Just some random clone? Slam. The boy went flying down the hallway, blood gushing out his nose. The crowd of students immediately panicked and spread out as classes stood frozen. Say that again. Izuku snarled, one for all already surging through his body in a storm of frenzied sparks and bolts. You bastard. The other teen from Class B immediately turned to metal and tried to strike Izuku with a right haymaker. Izuku caught it with his left hand, swept the boy's legs, and dropped his right fist into the boy's chest, spiking him into the ground out of breath. Say that again about my brother. See what happens. The boy was completely disoriented as Izuku grabbed his blazer only for a multitude of hands to grab him and pull him back. Izuku immediately tried to shake them off, but Shoji yelled at him to calm down. Midoriya, Django wouldn't want this. Remember what he said to you, Ratten Eliot. Izuku froze at the reminder and turned toward Shoji. How do you dash? All right, what's going on here? The crowd turned towards the arriving teachers, with a small squad of clones behind them. Aizawa and Vlad King. The latter's eyes were already red. Vlad-sensei, this brute attacked me. Yeah, I did. Like I said, insult my brother one more time and see what happens. The squad started to disperse the students, and one helped out Tetsu with the bruise. He tried to shake the clone's help off but stumbled. The punch had practically shattered his iron armor, and he wouldn't let himself show it, but he was shaken. Finally, the clone gave him a back-to-patch, told him to put it on his chest, and then make his way to the nurse. During the commotion, the rest of Class B had also filled out into the hallway, a few tending to the boy. Another clone handed them a smaller back-to-patch for his nose, after the boy tried swiping at him. Aizawa sighed before walking forward. Izuku already knew he was in trouble and followed. He paused, however, and turned back to the crowd. You want to know why I called you children? Midoriya, Aizawa warned.
No, Sensa.
They weren't there. They need to hear this. All of you came to us for some childish declaration of war. You didn't even realize that my class was about ready to attack you. Not because you were inferior or something like that, but because you idiots surrounded them and left them with no way out, just like the USJ? He roared. All of you came here because you wanted to see what life could have been, right? Well, guess what? None of you deserve to be heroes. Not like my class. Not until you find yourself surrounded by blood and tears and pain. My friends fought for their lives in a place that we were supposed to be safe. Do you think we take pride in that? That we were forced to fight for our lives? He started to move forward and most of the crowd backed away, except for the first boy who was frozen on the spot. My friend was almost crippled for life, as he pushed his quirk to the maximum just to get help. A teacher, a hero, had her back torn to pieces. Aizawa-sensei is still in casts, and look at him now. Izuku yelled as he motioned to the frozen man behind him. My brothers died. At this, his voice cracked and hot tears of rage poured down his cheeks. Over 1,000 of my brothers gone. I can't bring them back. You may think that they're just clones, that Django was just a clone. Izuku pointed at the blond boy who was petrified on his knees. Izuku panted as he finally started to run out of energy. A few noticed the specks of blood going down his hand and dripping to the floor. His head had fallen, and a few tears dropped onto the floor. But he wasn't. He was my brother, a part of my family. I would trade anything in the world to have him back. But I can't, so now I ask, are you ready for that? His question pierced through all of them as he looked up and faced them again. Because if the USJ taught us anything, it's that hero work isn't about glory or money or fame or being number one or any of that. Bakugo narrowed his eyes. It's about the ones back home, the people we want to come back home to. Kyoka hugged herself as she thought of her parents. It's about the legacies and responsibilities and duties that we support on our shoulders. Tenya thought of his family, especially his older brother. It's about supporting our loved ones. Ochako blushed as she remembered the conversation that she, Tenya, and Izuku had earlier about their reasons for becoming heroes after the funeral. It's about the people who fight by our side, who fall by our side, the people that we save and fail to save. Aizawa closed his eyes in remembrance. Yuga closed his in shame. You cry about unfairness because you didn't make it in. Well, guess what? Natural disasters, villain attacks, injustice, crime. The world's unfair. That's how it works. Here at UA, it's our job to learn to fight that unfairness as heroes. So either you step up to the plate or leave right here, right now. Aizawa's eyes opened in slight shock as he heard his speech being used. So if you're willing to pay the price, show me, show us, at the sports festival.
Plus ultra style.
The crowd was completely silent. Izuku was already face-to-face with the purple-headed boy. But if you're not, then get out our way. Because I, for one, refuse to let more children die. Izuku finished as he left without another word. Aizawa stayed there for just a moment, glanced at his class and then at the students, and uttered one phrase. Go to lunch. Now, we understand you're in the process of grief, and as such, we'll only be giving you detention, but young Midoriya, you must understand that assaulting your classmates outside of sanctioned exercises is forbidden for a reason. Nizu finished as he sipped his tea. His beady eyes stared at Izuku with regret in them. The teen simply stared at the ground in a mix of shame and anger, refusing to meet his eyes. All Might and Aizawa were off to the side, staring at him in concern. I understand, sir. It won't happen again. Nizu sighed. I understand at least part of how you feel, young Midoriya. Django was somebody I considered a friend and a fellow sentient being. His loss is heavy, but there was nothing you could have done. You're wrong, Izuku whispered. They stayed quiet for a moment, and then All Might sighed and rested a hand on Izuku's shoulder. You're thinking about it, aren't you? What you could have done, what you should have done, all the what-ifs. Izuku gulped deeply and was shaking.
Yes.
Izuku, I know how you feel. I could have dematerialized him. Izuku cut in as he started to glare at his own hand. I can summon and dismiss my clones, take them back to the safety of the mindscape. But I froze. My mind went blank and he started to choke and hunched in on himself, his body shaking with wretched sobs. The teachers let him be for a moment as they thought about what to say. All Might sat on his haunches and stared at Izuku's form in understanding. Have I ever told you about the day I lost my master? Izuku paused and looked up at him. Nizu raised an eyebrow and Aizawa's eyes widened slightly in shock, not expecting to know a bit more about the symbol of peace. What? Like you, I didn't have the power I have today when I was young, and my prospects for being a hero were small, to say the least. Nizu snorted slightly. That was an understatement, if anything, with how worse society was back then. But one day, I met a heroine who took me under her wing and helped me fulfill my dream of becoming a pillar for the people to rely on so that they could smile without fear. She helped me gain the power that I have today. One for all. What happened to her? The same villain that dealt this wound to me took her from me all those years ago. I defeated him, once and for all, but it did nothing for the loss I still felt. All Might said as he took a deep breath and admitted something he had only admitted once. I loved her as if she were my mother. Aizawa now felt that he shouldn't have stayed for this conversation. It felt far too personal for his tastes. Izuku was filled with feelings of understanding and empathy, and oddly enough in some part at the back of his mind, a brief spark of affection. All Might knew, and more than likely so did Aizawa-sensei, and all the other teachers. They all knew how he felt. The uselessness, the fear, the anger, the hatred. Did you hate him? The villain that did that? With all my being, hatred is merely an emotion, a powerful one that can affect us and even give us strength, but it blinds us. That is what led me to get this wound. I was blind to my hatred and paid the cost. Izuku gulped as paid closer attention to All Might's emaciated form. You hate Shigaraki, that's fine. That only means that you're human. But you cannot let your emotions control you. That only leads to suffering. Izuku stayed silent but nodded. Come on, let's get you some lunch. Walking together, All Might had buffed up since he was heading to teach his next class. Vlad King will take care of his students. Let them know that it was, and is, highly inappropriate to disparage Django's memory like that. Thank you, All Might. They stopped at a junction in the hallway. Look, Izuku, I just want you to know that, he gulped. Remembering the words that Inko had told him while they were in the hospital, he'd yet to confront Izuku about it, however. It was still too soon. I'm here for you, my boy. I always will be. Izuku slightly teared up and nodded, hugging the man. Izuku relished the feeling of having an older male figure that he could look up to. After a bit, they parted, and All Might grabbed his shoulder. Come by my office after school. I'd like to talk to you about the sports festival. It's an important event, and you need to make your mark. Sure thing, be All Might, Izuku said. Walking towards the cafeteria, Lunch Rush had already been notified and had something prepped for him. Neither of the two noticed the mismatched eyes that had been staring at them. Todoroki narrowed them, and he remained deep in thought. Izuku and All Might were sitting across from each other, talking about various things before they got to the root of the matter. Now, about the sports festival, you already know that this is one of the most important events in Japan, and it's your turn to make your mark. People are already hearing about the security forces, but now it's up to you. I understand, as your successor, this is my first impression to the world. Exactly. Izuku, I want you to do your best. I want you to win. I want you to declare to the world that you are here. Izuku felt the responsibility weigh heavily on his shoulders and nodded. I'm going to do my best, All Might. For you, for Mom, for everybody who's ever believed in me. The VOD. He paused and swallowed thickly. For Django. All Might smiled sadly at him. The man was also dealing with his internal guilt over not being there that day. I know that it's hard, Izu. For the longest time after my master died, I was angry and full of so many emotions that I was lost. People say that we follow the 5 stages of grief in order, but sometimes it's not that simple. Does it get easier? Yes, one day, you'll realize that the pain's not as sharp, more bittersweet. As you surround yourself with loved ones, you'll fondly remember those that have gone. You mourn for them, of course, but you feel joy for their memory, that they were a part of your life. Izuku closed his eyes and thought to himself. That sounded like something very beautiful, something that he hoped to one day reach, but right now, his heart was still in turmoil. But still, something special like that deserved a name.
Oh, Ihan.
What was that? Something for Nizu's dictionary, Ahan. The bittersweet perfect moment of mourning and joy. Ahan? Close Aihan, Ahan.
Oh, Ihan.
They stayed silent for a moment longer, simply drinking tea. Can you tell me about her? Of course. And for the rest of the afternoon, Izuku learned about Nana Shimura, and Tashinori learned about Django Midoriya. Soon enough the day of the sports festival arrived, and thousands upon thousands of spectators were filling the stands. Fireworks exploded over the UA campus. At the gates themselves, reporters and other civilians complained at the wait lines, but were quickly moved along by the clones that dotted the grounds. Tickets, please, then place your bags on the scanner. A clone directed as the family grabbed their stuff and put it on a conveyor belt. Another clone was working on an X-ray machine and quickly scanned the bags. Soon enough the family was let through and picked up their stuff, but the first clone noticed something on his terminal and asked them to halt. Is there something wrong, sir? No, but my terminal just got a notice. You're the Ajui family, right? The father, who appeared very similar to a bullfrog, smiled and nodded. The rest of his family, who all had frog traits, were also a bit confused but also nodded. Great, just stand over here, will you? I'll call an escort for you. We've got special seats for your family. The family was surprised, but nodded and waited patiently. Soon enough, another clone came by and led them towards another part of the stadium. They slightly overheard some complaints about the special treatment they were given, but the clone merely told them to move along. Ganma was at first a bit off-put by how many clones he could see patrolling the campus, but it made sense after what Su told him, and he could never think bad about the clones. After all, they had saved his princess. What's your name, sir? I don't really got a name yet, sir. Us clones start with numbers, and we try and find our own identities and name ourselves. Oh, Ganma was struck speechless. Su sure wasn't kidding when she said that the clones were unique, not only as individuals but as a group. Do you by chance know which one of you saved my daughter? Carried her up the stairs of the USJ? I wish I could say. I was in the middle of the fighting against the abomination. We heard that many of your brothers lost their lives, Baru said, placing her hand on his shoulder. And Su explained to us what that means. None of them can come back, right? They stopped a bit in one of the halls, already near the VIP section. Yeah, I should be happy. They died as warriors, and we finally managed to kill that thing. I executed it myself, taking the last shot, or shots as it were. But Baru pulled the clone into a hug, surprising him. I think that all of you are children and have been exposed to far too much for your age. You may be clones, but if what I've gathered from Tsu and talking with you is right, you're still people, and none of you have killed before. Even if it was an abomination, that still carries scars. She grabbed his helmet, and with his permission took it off, gasping softly as his face was exposed. Just a boy, she murmured. The clone would have taken offense were it any other person, but she reminded him of Inko. They stayed like that for a bit, and the clone simply relaxed, not crying. He didn't feel the need to, but relaxed. You carry a heavy burden, don't you? Yes, but a necessary one. After a bit longer, she let go and smiled sweetly at him, and 782 smiled back. Ganma then came and pat his shoulder while the smaller ones hugged his waist. We might not be able to find the one that saved our princess, but we all thank you for what you and your brothers did for us. The clone nodded gratefully and put his helmet back on. Soon enough they found themselves in the VIP section where other families of Class A were, a gift from Nizu after everything that had happened at the USJ. Here we are, thank you. He turned away and walked a step forward but then turned back. You know, I didn't get a chance to meet your mother at the funeral. Who is she? Ah, the All-Mother, is right there, with the green hair, Midoriya Frigga. The clone looked to be holding back a chuckle. Odd name for a Japanese, but okay. The clone looked to be holding back a chuckle again, but she couldn't tell with the helmet on though. He quickly gave a jaunty salute, waved goodbye to her children, and left. As he walked down the hall, he was waved down by a few other clones who had also been escorts. Hey, 782. You good? Yeah, I'm feeling great. He joined their patrol, and they made their way down to the main gates. By the way, call me Heavy. Sure thing, Heavy. Excuse me, Midoriya Frigga? Oh my goodness, not you too. The lithe, green-haired woman said as she held her face in her hands, the slightest tinges of red from embarrassment leaking out. The blonde, almost skeletal man next to her started guffawing and coughed up blood. It made them freak out a bit, but he waved them off and said that he had a condition.
I'm sorry.
No, it's not your fault. It's those blasted boys. She gave an indignant shout as she then leaned over the handrail and glared at 3 clones who were below them. The 3 started to laugh uproariously before scurrying away. I know your names. Get back here, Waxer. Boyle. Mayhem. Their laughter echoed back, and she merely grumbled as the man next to her continued to chuckle. Ugh, sorry about that. You see, my boys thought that it'd be funny if they gave me a nickname. So they started calling me the All-Mother. Then one of them got into the idea of doing actual research and now tell everybody they come across that my name's Frigga, the goddess of Norse mythology. Baru started to lightly chuckle. idly noticing her children playing with the other children in the room. Midoriya sighed before nudging the man next to her. Her husband, perhaps? I'm Midoriya Inko, and this is Toshinori Yagi, family friend. A pleasure to meet you both. I'm Baru, and this is Ganma. Oh right, the Ajuis, it's so good to finally meet you, I dash. And as they got to know each other, Baru noticed three things. The first, Midoriya Inko was a strong woman, extremely necessary for someone who reportedly now had thousands of kids. Baru appreciated what they did, but still shuddered at the thought. Second, she was still heavily grieving, which made sense because she had also lost a lot of her kids. According to the memorial by the main entrance anyway, all of them would never get the chance to know her. Except for one, Django. Sue had told her about Izuku and Django and the brotherhood that they had. She could only imagine how hard it must be for Inko. She couldn't even fathom losing one of her kids. She almost did. And third, Midoriya Inko was so very, very proud of her sons. Well, that and she detected a hint of something between her and Yagi, but decided to let it be for now. Izuku had hoped to start this day brightly, but recently nightmares had been plaguing his sleep, haunting him with images of what had happened and what didn't. Although fortunately this last one had stopped rather suddenly. Oh well, small mercies. He rose out of his bed early in the morning and went out to the main hall where they had their own private memorial for Django. He kneeled, and bowing his head uttered a small prayer.
Ni sukuyi, garka y erreadik, ni partailos, gardarasum, yango, bode.
He absent-mindedly felt his mother kneel next to him and utter the same prayer, and they simply stayed like that for a time until the sun started to rise and they had to prepare for the sports festival. Once they were ready, they headed outside to where Toshinori was with his pickup and made their way towards UA. The roads were starting to get clogged as more and more cars headed up towards the campus. Fortunately, UA hiring the clones helped organize things a lot better, with clones serving at security checkpoints, traffic direction, patrols, and even helping guests. Seeing Toshinori's pickup, one of the clones motioned them to a special parking spot for staff and VIP guests. Soon enough the group would find themselves at their seats, and Izuku would kiss his mother goodbye and give a quick hug to Toshinori. They were the first ones there, and so were alone. After a moment of silence, Inko slyly grinned at the older man who was looking fondly into the distance to where Izuku disappeared. You make a good father. Blurg. Inko giggled as Toshinori stuttered and tried to stave off his embarrassment. It's fine, Toshinori, she said as she lightly held onto his arm. We already talked about this. You're good for him. Toshinori sighed deeply and nodded, the last of the red fading from him as he and Inko stared out into the stadium. Oh ho ho. What's this, Inko? You didn't tell me you had a new boyfriend? Inko merely face-bombed, the both of them turning red. Sigh, hello, Mitsuki. Way to ruin the moment. Turning, she happily greeted her friend while expertly deflecting any questions with the grace of somebody who had been friends with the woman for decades. Toshinori and Masaru merely stood by, the former watching in awe and the latter in amusement. Inko finally managed to wear Mitsuki down a bit and properly introduced him while dispelling any misconceptions. Still didn't get rid of Mitsuki's teasing. As the rest of the families arrived, and wasn't it annoying to be called Frigga almost 15 times? Once she found those three, she would make them pay. I'm so glad that Izuku and Django weren't nearly into pranks as those three, she thought, ignoring the small pang in her heart. She watched as the thousands of people entered the stadium and took special pride in being able to pick out her boys from the crowd. Granted, they were wearing white armor, but it was still the thought that counts. Seeing them like this, however, was a bit awe-inspiring. Regardless of how many people filled the stadium, there was still a scattered sea of white among them. Her boy had come so far. Her attention was brought to the enormous screen where Present Mike suddenly appeared. Hey! The audience started cheering. Pay attention, audience. Swarm. Mass media. This year's high school rodeo of adolescence that you all love, the UA Sports Festival, is about to begin. Are you ready? The crowd roared as they all paid attention to the entrance on the stage grounds. It's time for the students to enter the first-year stage. As the music began, all of them eagerly waiting for the students to come out, Inko paid special attention to seeing her son. As the students took their first steps into the stage, Inko noticed one horrible thing. "Oh no. What is it, Inko?" She heard Mitsuki ask as she felt Toshinori stiffen. "Izuku's angry," she whispered. Something had happened. Earlier, Izuku had actually managed to take a slight nap, having gotten there before anybody, soon enough as other classmates had filed in, and although Tenya had wanted to wake Izuku up, he'd been convinced to let him rest a bit more. Once it hit about a half hour before the sports festival began, Ochako roused him from his sleep, and he started to do his stretches. Idly, he heard Ishido complain about not being able to use their costumes before Ojiro spoke about fairness, and some of the others wondering about the first round. Then Tenya burst in and announced that they would be leaving soon. Midoriya. Izuku turned toward the voice and found himself face to face with Todoroki. "Todoroki, how can I help you?" Staying silent for a moment, Todoroki responded. "Objectively, I think I'm stronger than you." Izuku merely stared at him, slightly confused. "But All Might has his eye on you, doesn't he?" Izuku grit his teeth slightly but listened. "I'm not trying to pry into that, but I'm going to beat you." Izuku's eyes narrowed, and he breathed deeply, controlling his anger. "Oh? Are the best in the class declaring war on each other?" Kaminari said with a grin. Kirishima, however, had gotten up and tried to calm Todoroki and Izuku, the latter certainly looking angrier. "Hey, what's up with that? Picking fights right before the festival starts. We're not here to make friends. So what does it matter?" Todoroki said while walking away. He only made it a few steps before Izuku's voice called out to him. "You know, you've got a lot of balls to say that. In front of everybody who has been working so hard to be here. Especially for somebody who refuses to use their full power." Todoroki froze. "Yeah, my clones told me what you did, about how you refused to use your full power because of some asinine vow." The room started to get cooler. "But let me tell you this, Todoroki. You better come at me with your full power, or I will break you, and I'll send you back to Endeavor in pieces." The room went chilly as Todoroki glared back at Izuku. "You dash. As I said, I refuse to let more people die." Izuku walked forward but stopped at the door. "Whether by a villain's hand, or yours. That wasn't the best way I could have handled that." Izuku thought with a slight hint of remorse, but at the moment he was too angry at Todoroki to even think about apologizing at the moment. Actually, he'd been angry a lot lately. All Might said that it's natural to be angry, but this just feels too much. As if his anger was consuming him. He breathed in deeply and focused, trying to calm himself as much as he could. Nope, not working. Probably just needed to burn it off. As they reached the stage, Present Mick's voice rang out into the sky. "And now introducing the stars who overcame villains with their hearts of steel. Hero Course, Class 1A. Yeah." Izuku stepped forward, head held high as he moved forward. Perhaps once, he would have quailed at the sight of thousands, but after everything, he found it cool. "I wish you were here to see this VOD. So many people. Will we be able to give our best performance, surrounded by so many?" Tenya contemplated. "We will have to, na VOD." Tenya nodded and lightly patted Izuku's shoulder. The two had become closer after Izuku had let him into the Bactopod, and Tenya was excited to show what his newly healed engines could do. "I guess this is just another aspect of hero life they're training us on." Izuku heard Kirishima also comment about the crowd with Bakugo, the latter only saying that he was being pumped up by it. Not wanting to focus on him, especially after what he'd heard from his brothers, Izuku continued walking. "These guys haven't had much time in the spotlight, but they're still full of talent." Hero Course, Class B. Next up, General Studies, C, D, E. Support courses F, G, and H are here, too. And business courses, Classes I, J, and K. A slight scuffle was heard from the microphone before it turned off for a brief moment, turning on once more. Let's not forget, though, that Classes CK represent the future backbone of both Hero and General Society. Well, at least they said something nice about us, didn't put so much focus on the Hero Course. I still feel like we're only here to make them look better. Up in the announcer box, Present Mike was gesturing wildly at Aizawa while next to them were Nizu and, surprisingly enough, Cody. While Nizu would be at the third-year festival, concerns had been awoken and he felt that he needed to address them. You see, sir, it's just as important to consider everybody else. Sports festival is not just about the heroes. We also have to consider the classes that take apprenticeships, internships at businesses, and tech companies. Yeah, I get ya. Aizawa snorted at the chastisement that Hizashi was getting from the clone, who just moments earlier had stopped the mic to remind Mike that the other courses deserved attention. Man, that rhyme was horrible. It almost sounded like a pun. He felt like misjoke. He shuddered in horror. Turning his attention back to the stadium, he noticed that Mike was about to start. We're about to kick things off, but first, a few words from our principal. Thank you, Present Mike. Hello, everyone. Am I a dog, a mouse, a bear? Who knows? But the important thing is that I am Principal Nizu. I know that this is unusual, but with these extenuating circumstances, I thought it important to speak about our security measures. Nizu took a moment to look at Cody. As you can see, we've done our utmost best to ensure that nothing such as the USJ happens again. However, should we find ourselves in any situation, even non-villain related, please pay attention to the men in white armor around you. They are the VOD, UA's security force. For those of you in the know, yes, they are provided by one of the students. However, to prevent any allegations of cheating, they will not participate in the sports festival. Speaking on their behalf is Marshal Commander Cody. Said Cody glared at the principal because this was not planned at all. Nevertheless, he just went with it. Good morning, everyone. I'm Marshal Commander Cody of the VOD. Like Principal Nizu said, if in case of emergency, listen to the VOD and they'll guide you safely and securely as the heroes deal with any existing threat. If you need help, such as lost children or the like, also feel free to ask. We're here to serve and protect, and also cheer on our brother. He added at the last second. Izuku slightly flushed at the attention now on him and tried to ignore the teasing grins from his friends. Thank you, Principal Nizu and Marshal Commander Cody. Now, onto the player pledge. The umpire announced, in this case, midnight. Immediately, almost half the crowd started to cheer at her appearance, many of them with partners delivering swift retribution. A few of the students even commented on her state of dress, wondering if it was appropriate for a school. Midnight barked at them to be quiet, slightly peeved at the insinuation. She only teased, not seduced students. Still, whipping her riding crop, she called forward the pledger. Representing the students is Midoriya Izuku from Class 1A. Izuku was startled but should have expected it. He did come first. Django should be here with me. It's Izuku. I mean, it makes sense. He did make it first in the entrance exam. In the hero course. Nah, I heard he got top scores for the regular exam too. Of course, it's Class A. Isn't he the guy that yelled at us? He's scary. He was kinda right though. I mean, according to the memorial, a lot of his clones died. So, he can just make more. That's not what he said. Once they die, they die. But still, they're clones. That's like saying ectoplasm cares if his clones die. He uses them as bait. Izuku grit his teeth as his temper started to fray, but paid no mind to their words. He took a deep breath and exhaled. About 2 weeks ago, our school was invaded. The muttering stopped. My class was attacked by villains, were hurt and almost killed by them. Then we were saved by the VOD, and I was forced to stand by as over 1,000 of my brothers died. The silence was deafening. My brother, Django, should be here today. The world may see them as clones, but they were my family. He was my family. It was because of them, however, because of their sacrifice, that 19 other families did not have to suffer what mine did. Izuku's eyes had been looking at nothing, but then he turned straight to the camera. You tried to go after All Might, and when that failed, you went after us. You failed, Izuku snarled as he glared at the camera. But I will let you know right now that even on the day that All Might retires, the symbol of peace will not fall, because on that day you will know. Izuku raised his fist. That I am here. Izuku lowered his fist. Today is merely the beginning. For all of you who challenge my class and me, I hope you bring it your all, fight with everything you have. And even if you fail, know that you gave it your all. Show to the world that you deserve to be here. Izuku yelled as he pointed at the students in front of him. Show that you are here. Izuku clenched his fist and brought it in front of him. Show that by going beyond.
Plus ultra.
The entire stadium roared with Izuku as he raised his fist again. He then walked off as the crowd began to cheer, even more excited for the upcoming events. Some of the students looked at him curiously, not expecting that from a hero course student. Many more felt the desire to take him up on his challenge and show what they were made of. Toshinori grinned wildly. This was even better than he imagined. Izuku was not only declaring himself as the successor to the symbol of peace, but also challenged his fellow students to meet him at the top. He's really come a long way, hasn't he, Toshi? Yes, he has, Inko. You'd be so proud of him, master. The ashen remains of a cup fell to the ground, drops of liquid falling into them. Shigaraki glared hatefully at the screen in front of him, already his temper rising as he scratched his neck. This kid is baiting me. Shigaraki then realized that this was no mini-boss, but another player, albeit one that was lower level than he. The game was now in two-player mode, and he was quickly rising in stats. Looks like we have a race in completing our quests. He ground out. To destroy the symbol of peace, or become it. Shigaraki smiled horrifically. Game on. As Shigaraki continued to watch, All for One was pleasantly surprised. The cup was the only thing that had been destroyed. Usually, it'd be the table and chair by now, and perhaps the TV. Izuku Midoriya, one day we will meet, and I must certainly thank you for inspiring my successor, he said as he moved a piece forward, not taking anything. He chuckled. Now, let's get started right away. Midnight exclaimed with a sadistic smile as she started. A few of the students commented about the fast pace of things, but ultimately put it up to UA's specialty. Every year, many drink their tears here. Them or you. A clone muttered from the stands. It just so happened that he said that next to a hero who started to chuckle at that. One with seafoam green hair and an orange bandana. Aizawa felt immediate doom for some reason. Now the fateful first game. On cue, an enormous board appeared, rapidly spinning challenges. This year it's... Everybody leaned forward as they awaited the result. Izuku stared at the spinning board with apprehension but was feeling confident and motivated by his own speech. He hoped that the other students understood that while he may have been harsh the other day, he only wanted them to understand the truth of being a hero. Just a little ways off, Todoroki glared balefully at Izuku's back, the area around him slightly cooler. He knew a challenge when he heard it, but he tried oh so desperately to shove the guilt that was eating away at his heart down. The board finished spinning. An obstacle race. Author. I know, cliffhanger. But I want a bit of time to plan things out. I want this race to be different than canon. Originally, I wanted an entirely new challenge, but couldn't come up with anything. Be prepared for different obstacles, however. Again, thank you, and please continue reviewing. I'll try and make it so that it's not so long till the next update, but I comp within the next month, so it'll be hard. Bright side is that I get a break after. Chapter 10. Rising to the Challenge. Legion. Rising to the Challenge. Great leaders inspire greatness in others. An obstacle course. Izuku murmured as he cracked his bones. All 11 classes will participate in this race. The course will be the outer circumference of the stadium, about 4 kilometers. Midnight then licked her lips. And remember, this school is all about freedom. As long as you stay in the course, it doesn't matter what you do. Izuku looked at Tenya and Ochako, who were right next to him, and were talking about something in whispers. He then glanced at his other friends that were nearby. Anything, huh? Izuku grinned. Now, everybody, take your places, please. The group soon found themselves near the back of the crowd, although they had been worried by the positioning until Izuku explained why. You know, that was a really good speech you did, Izuku, Ochako complimented as she got ready. Yes, truly inspiring, my friend. Hey guys, ready to rock this? Kyoka asked as she walked near them.
Oui, mon ami.
Yuga appeared to seem better, the sparkle returning to his eyes. Do you mind if we join you all? The group turned and saw Momo and Ishido. The group was surprised but nodded. Great. What's the plan, class prez? Well, the first thing we have to look out for is the entrance. We've got about, what? 11 classes, 20 students per class? 220 students minimum. The general studies and business courses are larger than the hero and support courses. Momo helpfully supplied. The rest of the group blanched. Then we've got about 300 students right here, in one narrow hallway. That's gonna get clogged faster than Yuga's toy dash.
Mon ami. Pourquoi?
Yuga interrupted Kyoka with an indignant cry, the latter starting to chuckle. They had also grown a bit closer after their ordeal at the USJ, and she had snapped him out of his funk during the funeral. If you want to be better, then get better. Django sacrificed himself for all of us. Don't let it be in vain. If you're worried about not being up to snuff, that's why you have friends, you French noodle. Yuga had already spoken with the support course, and had actually managed to get some armor pieces from one of the clones. At first he was hesitant, because some of the armor was scavenged, and he did not wish to be disrespectful. But the clone who gave it to him merely shook his head. Our armor is merely an extension of our willingness to protect. Many brothers died, yes. But at least through you, they can live on in battle through their armor. You'll have to get a chest piece from Izuku, though. He wanted to surprise Fordo. So, how do we get past this? Well, the obvious way is to go above everybody. But considering that we're 7 people, Izuku started to mutter for a brief 10 seconds, a habit that was unfortunately coming back. He then gave an odd sort of grimace. Well, I have an idea, but it's going to be a bit weird. He then turned to Yaoyorozu and grinned. The fact that you're here, though, Yaoyorozu, makes things a lot easier. That was a dirty trick, sir, Cody said as he leaned back from the microphone as Midnight started her explanation. I choose to consider it as a learning experience, Commander, Nizu said with a chuckle. Mike joined him while Aizawa gave a brief snort. All too used to Nizu's little learning experiences. They all stared as the light began counting down. 3, 2, 1. Start. The crowd of students rushed forward, and Mike eagerly started the commentary. Okay, here's the play-by-play. He then turned towards Aizawa. Are you ready to do the commentary, cripple? Shut the hell up, you're the one who forced me to come. And don't call me that. We're on live TV. And what about you, Commander Cody? Please, for now, just Cody and sure. Principal Nizu had already left with some clones, heading over to the third-year stage. Well then you two. Let's get started. So what should we pay attention to in the early stages? Aizawa narrowed his eyes. This part right now. As predicted earlier, the tunnel became utterly clogged with students, the situation becoming even worse as Todoroki took advantage of the opportunity and froze the exit, leaving a good amount of students frozen to the ground. Not all of them, though. Multiple members of both hero courses leaped over the ice and continued forward, each one declaring their intent of not being stopped. You declared war on the wrong person, you half-and-half bastard. Bakugo yelled as he blasted forward with his explosions. And Todoroki takes the lead with Bakugo close behind. From behind, however, a great spark of light flashed and then a streak of green and blue as something absolutely rocketed past the competition. What's this? A new leader? No, a new group of leaders. Soaring through the air was Izuku with a special harness that connected to Kyoka, Yuga, Ochako, Yaoyorozu, Ishido, and Tenya, the latter being directly on Izuku's back. Earlier, Ochako had erased all except her and Izuku's gravity. Carrying everybody on his back, he leaped to gain the height necessary, and then Tenya put his engines on full blast, the group shredding through the tunnel in less than 5 seconds and easily putting their group ahead. An odd display. In this free-for-all, we now have students working together for the first time. Eraser. Cody, what are your thoughts? It makes sense, especially for this group. They all fought together in one way or another at the USJ, and if I had to hazard a guess, this was all Midoriya's idea. Well, VOD's always been one for crazy ideas, even if it doesn't seem like it. No surprise that he inspired the others, though. You heard it, folks. Midoriya's causing waves already, leading others to victory. But can they keep it as they approach the next challenge? The group stopped and dismounted. All of them agreed that regardless of their potential to merely blitz through the event, They also wanted to prove themselves. And what better way than through? It's the wall. Wall was an understatement. The blasted thing was a monolith. At least 100 meters high with different balconies, grips, and more than likely multiple traps. Look, I know that you all want to do this under your own power and all, but at least let me give you a boost. Ochako? She shook her head, looking a bit queasy. Sorry, won't be able to use my quirk for a bit. That's fine. He let one for all charge up and gave them all boosts, launching them high enough so that they could get a decent lead before going himself. Race you to the top? Oh, you're on Izuku. A friendly competition, I agree. Dikuru. They all heard from below and saw Bakugo and Todoroki finally reach the wall. Bakugo started to use his explosions to climb up, but was forced to use them sparingly to not dehydrate. Todoroki tried to create an ice pillar and simply shoot himself upward, but as luck would have it, a kid from the Gen Ed course, who had a salt quirk and a big vendetta against the hero course, simply blasted the pillar. Said student also was the one who freed a lot of people from the beginning of the course. But that was enough of them. As it was, Todoroki was now forced to use his ice sparingly as well, and use the various grips and balconies to make his way to the top. And Jairu Kyoka takes the lead, with the rest of Midoriya's little group close behind, and just behind them, Bakugo and Todoroki brutally fight for the next top spots. Kyoka was actually surprised. She didn't expect to make it this far. But well, she was the lightest, and when Izuku tossed her up, she did gain a good deal of height. Out of nowhere, however, the section of the wall she was gripping went flat, and she immediately started sliding. With a gasp and a scream, she started to fall before a strong arm grabbed her, slightly yanking her arm. Ow!
Sorry.
No worries, Tenya.
Thanks for saving me. You all better watch out, 'cause this wall is full of surprises. Don't worry, though, you won't die. Nice show of sportsmanship, though. With a swing, Tenya helped Kyoka get back into pace, although she had lost her lead. Now it was Ashido up top with her superior athleticism, flipping and jumping across balconies like a gymnast. She then lost some of her lead as she was forced to swing down a couple feet to avoid a series of traps. Punching gloves, amazingly enough. This is just getting weird now. Yaoyorozu, who had now taken the lead, then noticed something about the wall. Guys, the traps get more concentrated the higher up you go. Do you recognize any patterns? She started to scan around, but unfortunately, it seemed to be entirely at random. And since no one had reached the upper levels, none of the traps had activated yet. Not yet. Keep trying. We'll make it as we go. Below them, the students continued to rise and fall as they scaled the wall. Dozens of traps springing along the way. Kaminari had nearly fallen into a pool of water that had jutted out beneath him. Tsuyu nearly had her tongue trapped as she used it to increase her distance. Her natural abilities helped her immensely during this challenge, and she had easily caught up to the group, further infuriating Bakugo and Todoroki. Said heroes in training were also having their troubles with traps, Todoroki being exposed to various slippery surfaces and even the occasional flamethrower. Bakugo became intimately acquainted with punching gloves. A couple of other students were suddenly swept away by a water slide that appeared beneath their feet, and one unfortunate soul found the spring trap. AIE. Fortunately, students discovered that there were in fact secret entrances, with stairs that went either up or down. Some spots had their own traps, however, so it was a gamble, as another student discovered. Somewhere else, in a secluded room, cut off to the announcements and cameras of the sports festival, some of the clones were managing the controls to the obstacles. To keep things fair and just, they only had screens that had the students represented as dots on the obstacles, and it was to their discretion when and where to activate the traps. Wish we knew who exactly we were targeting. Wouldn't want to accidentally hit Izuku. It's fine. Besides, this is about fairness. VOD wouldn't want us to give him special treatment. I mean, you saw his speech, right? Said clone was about to repeat it again, but was cut off by another. Everybody saw his speech, Echo. Stop calling me that, Stop repeating everything. Guys, quit it please. Sorry, Fives. They both replied. Hey, I just heard from some of the others. 782 just got a name. Oh, really? What is it? Heavy, without the A. Oh, that's cool. The clones continued to press buttons and flip switches, having a dark amusement as they saw dots rise and fall. Really wish we knew who we were hitting. Same. Five said as he pushed a button. Back to the event. Mineta sobbed feebly, as for the third time. A punching bag trap hit his groin. Why? For the next few seconds, he would lay there limply against the wall, catching his breath. Back to the clones. Either way, it's kind of exciting. I honestly really just want to activate all the traps at once and see what happens. Probably would knock everybody down and set the festival back. Yeah. Oh well, I guess I'll just have to leave it to my imagination. Outside of the arena, various pro heroes were patrolling as well, going through the stands and the like. Empty Lady, Death Arms, and Kamui Woods in particular had been walking together, the first eating some food that she had shamelessly used her sex appeal to get for free. The group had been surprised by the appearance of the boy that had interfered in an incident a year ago. Sheesh, kid really cares about his clones, huh? Empty Lady said as she nibbled on her food. Death Arms and Kamui Woods were staring at her in slight disbelief. Didn't you read the brief packet? Nope. What? What? It was boring. I already have to deal with a lot of paperwork due to insurance payouts. I can skip a simple brief about guard duty, even if we have to deal with a bunch of clones. A pair of said clones stared at her from behind, slightly shocked, looked at each other, and shook their heads before moving on. Death Arms face-bombed and Kamui merely shook his head in exasperation. Fortunately, having known her for the past year, they knew that her comments were from ignorance rather than maliciousness. Still wouldn't help with their reputation. Nizu had explicitly ordered all the heroes to not antagonize the clones, and had even provided security footage to those in the top 50 that were attending the festival. Kamui still shuddered, horrified at the carnage that he had seen. He had relayed to Death Arms what they had done, what they had sacrificed, what they had suffered. Kamui understood that Midoriya Izuku's clones were of one of the rare true sentient types. Most sentient quirks were merely extensions of the holder. A few were expressive, and could have different personalities but still tied their wielder. But rare were the ones that were capable of independent thought. Why, Kamui couldn't even remember the last recorded case. As far as he cared, however, these clones, the VOD, they were certainly worthy of being heroes. And one can't forget that speech. Kamui idly mused. To so boldly declare to be the symbol of peace's successor, it would certainly shake quite a few trees. Moving away from his teammates, Kamui continued to do a solo patrol, waving at various civilians who had stepped outside the arena for a quick snack. Spotting a hint of white, he found a couple of clones talking with each other. Or at least he assumed so. The sound was muffled, although the brief did mention radio capabilities in their helmets. Excuse me, Kamui Woods? What can we do for you, sir? I just wanted to apologize for my teammate. She's ignorant, not malicious. Oh, well, thank you. The clone was obviously surprised, not expecting it at all. But it's fine. She's not the only one that's making comments like that. It is still an injustice and unbecoming of a pro hero. Unfortunately, sir, when you all wear the same face, people don't really see you as different. But you're more than just part of a quirk, correct? Yeah, we are. The brief that we heroes were given was sparse on that, but I did see the video of you all defending the USJ. At that the clones both shuddered and went still, and Kamui felt like an idiot for even mentioning that. If he was in their place, he wouldn't want constant reminders of something that traumatizing, even if he was a pro. My apologies, I did not wish to bring up any harsh memories. It's fine, we're making our way through it. I'd like to know more about you all, if you're willing, that is. Sure. It'd certainly be nice to have something to do on this patrol. Do you have names? I saw in the brief that some do, and some don't. Well, actually dash. And so Kamui got to know the clones and new friendships were made. As the students continued to make their way up the wall, their families were watching excitedly. The Kyukas in particular were extremely proud of their little girl for taking the lead, as short as it was. You know, they've really become such fast friends. Well, according to Momo, they all became closer after the events of the USJ. Once they heard those words, all the parents in the stands became quiet, the roar of the crowd seeming to fade to the background. It was odd how so few words could have such an impact. At the moment, the excitement was less active since the students were all stuck on the wall in one way or another, and the parents had a chance to honestly talk to each other about what their children went through since not all of them went to the funeral. You know, I never got to thank your son. He left so quickly at the funeral. I admit, I don't really understand what makes his clones so different, but without them our little Ochako wouldn't be here today, Mr. Urarka said as he looked at the screen portraying the group in the lead. The cameras had quickly focused on the group. They were becoming a crowd favorite. He noticed how Midoriya along with the Yayarosa girl were cheering on their friends and even helping each other out. How Ochako started to feel a little sick from using her quirk, and one of them, the Ida boy if he wasn't mistaken, even stayed by her side to help her. I'd like to understand though. I think that he would appreciate that, Inko said as Toshinori nodded, both of them giving sad smiles to the group. I saw the memorial up front. Only one clone was named, Django, right? Yes, Django. He was my second son. Although he only appeared about 6 years a little troublemaker, but always there for Izuku. If you don't mind me asking, how come the others didn't have names? Inko merely sighed before turning her eyes back to the screens. Because they never got the chance to. That just about killed the atmosphere, and the rest of the families looked back at the screens. Look, they made it to the top of the wall. And it was true. Momo had managed to avoid the worst traps, and as such had reached the top before anybody else, although the rest were not far behind. And Yayarozu takes first in a stunning display of ingenuity. Now she faces the second obstacle. Yayarozu went a bit green from the height they were at, but was feeling confident as she had discovered the reference that the wall actually was. Earlier. Guys, I think I got it now. It's like that old game, Snakes and Ladders. This is the weirdest version of Snakes and Ladders that I've ever Izuku grunted as he dodged a flaming arrow. The edges of his hair burnt slightly. Played. I mean seriously? Flaming arrows? This has Niza written all over it. Said Chimera was laughing gleefully as he watched the chaos unfold from his tablet while in the third-year arena box. Momo quickly analyzed the wall and started noticing the pattern, but also wanted to confirm something. Midoriya. Yeah. You and Django knew Niza the best. If he made a pattern or a trap, what would he do? If he had unlimited freedom, he'd make sure to close all exits, but since this is a competition, he'd leave at least one way free. It'd be stupid tricky to find though. I can't remember how many times Django used to complain about it when we played his little games. The memory brought a bitter smile to Izuku's face that was quickly knocked off by a punching bag. He almost lost his grip, but managed to hold on tight. Ow. Thank you. Momo then started to look at the balconies that people were on below here, and started to notice a trend. Midoriya. Would he ever do something really complicated, then simple just to mess with you? All the damn time. It's what makes him unpredictable. Then I think I got it. She jumped to the nearest balconies and started to calculate in her mind. The wall is about 7 balconies wide and 25 tall. Grips and protrusions don't count. They're too random. But while a majority of the balconies have traps that activate, some never do. She smiled. 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, 21. Trap. Okay, so not completely, otherwise it'd be too far. You'd have to swing around everywhere. 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, and trap. But it still confirms it, Fibonacci. Momo grinned. But that still begged the question. How to get from 3 to 5? The traps are either timed, or under a remote control with a delayed reaction. She then noticed a group of people going over the same trap, using each other as cannon fodder. One activated the trap, and another passed by. The trap reset, and the third managed to pass safely, but the fourth wasn't so lucky. A delay between resets. She then made her way to the next 3, and used creation to make a pole with a weight. Now to test my theory. Setting the weight on the balcony, she watched as suddenly became a slide. She barely managed to hold the weight in the air until it reset. Putting the weight back on, she watched as 5 seconds passed by and the trap activated again. This time allowing the weight to swing so that she could bring it back up to her balcony. She grinned as she finally got the pattern. A simple pattern, but not one that many students would recognize. Guys, 1, 1, 2, 3, 5. 5 seconds. She yelled as with gusto, she made her way through the traps and balconies, soon enough finding herself at the top. I did it. Staring at the next obstacle in front of her, however, made her feel slightly worried. And coming up next, if something comes up, it must come down. It's the slide. Again, an understatement, the slide was more like a tunnel, twisting and turning constantly as it headed towards the ground, and it seemed to have its own traps and pitfalls along the way. The surface was extremely lubricated, making it easy for one to lose control. Oh my goodness. Still, taking advantage of the moment, she created a board and some protective gear, and started her way. And Yaoyorozu takes the lead, but what's this? Her little group isn't far behind. Izuku and Tenya ended up being the next to make it over the wall. The two were grinning wildly at each other, and were fired up at their own little race. I see we have made it, my friend, but I'm afraid that I can't let myself lose in a race. I'm built for it. Oh yeah, Tenya. And what are you gonna do about it? Izuku asked as he charged one for all. I have to thank you, Izuku. Thanks to your Bacta fixing up my engines, I can now do this for much longer. At that, Izuku heard a whine become a roar as Tenya's pipes turned red before he jumped on the slide and started to, well, slide down it. Recipro burst. Tum. Izuku gawked as he saw his friend absolutely blitz down the slide, soon overtaking Momo, and in a shocking display of speed. Ida takes first this time. Oh no you don't, Tenya. Izuku yelled as he slid down as well, making small jumps to gain distance and height as well as fall down instead of slide. And Midoriya runs close behind. Oh come on guys. Yaoyorozu's competitive spirit seemed to have been ignited as well as with a grin she created a harness with a cone on her back and was suddenly sent flying by the force of a jet engine. Did she just make a jet engine out of her back? Eraser, what the hell are you teaching your class? Leave me out of this, I don't even know anymore. Cody merely laughed uproariously. While it wasn't really a jet engine, it was certainly very fast and, unfortunately, hard to control. I didn't think this through. She yelled as she passed Midoriya and Tenya with a shriek, as she suddenly found herself floating over a black pit that would certainly make her fail. She gasped as she felt two hands grab her arms and give her the momentum to go forward. Izuku and Tenya helping her get across to the other side as the three landed and continued to slide down. WY. You know, I think that it's nice that the sports festival is a way to show off and all, but I think people forget how we're also here to be heroes. Izuku began. And how could we call ourselves heroes if we ignored a friend in danger? Tenya finished. We all made a promise to meet each other at the end. Can't let you fall back on that, can we, Yaoyorozu? Momo smiled brightly and nodded. Call me Momo. Izuku. Tenya. What amazing sportsmanship. Now Ida, Midoriya, and Yaoyorozu are sharing first place. How long will this teamwork last? That was sweet, guys, but I hope you haven't forgotten about us. But it looks like the rest of Class A is close behind. What are your thoughts on this, Eraser? Cody? The trio looked behind them and saw several of their friends catching up in their own ways. While they were still far, they were slowly but surely making their way forward. The tunnel had various pillars, dips, falls, and pits and more that students were already overcoming. All of my class fought during the USJ. They know what danger lies in hesitating. Just behind them, Izuku could see the flashes of explosions and stretches of ice. They've all got that experience, Present Mike. They all know what it means to be on the brink and come back from that. Izuku merely grinned as he saw his friends close behind. Ashido was using her acid to increase her velocity. Ochako was using her quirk sparingly to make jumps and gain distance, Yuga doing the same with his lasers. Behind them, the other members of Class A and even members of Class B were close behind along with a scattering of other students. You guys can go on ahead. I know how much you want to race each other. Momo yelled out as she held on tightly as they started to dodge obstacles. Both of them gave a wary look at her. You sure? Yeah, I'll meet you at the end. I also kinda want to slow down a bit, 'cause you're both making my stomach roll. Oh, sorry. My apologies, Momo. Hey, Tenya. Yes? Let's continue our race then? Of course. Momo, count us off. Momo grinned as they started to loosen their grip on their arms. 3, 2, 1, go. Simultaneously letting go, the two rocketed forward with their quirks down the rest of the slide, their natural speed giving them an enormous advantage compared to the rest of the competition. Izuku was pushing his body to its limits and felt absolutely alive, one for all flooding through every vein and muscle, the wild green lightning that was becoming a trademark to it lashing out wildly. Tenya felt exhilarated. While normally he wouldn't be so blasé with his quirk, this was one of the only times that he really could cut loose, and he hadn't really had a chance to race anybody, his brother far too busy, and to be honest, far too skilled, to provide any sort of excitement. How uncouth. It's exciting. The two jumped over pits, dodged pillars, and even used each other as anchors for even more stunts. As they reached the end of the tunnel, the barest hint of light peeking through, they both jumped and let their momentum carry them to the bottom where a pool calmly awaited them. Splash! Quickly swimming back up, they both laughed with each other before making their way to the edge. That was the most fun I've ever had. Thank you, Izuku. I haven't had somebody that I could really push myself against in a race. You kidding me? That was awesome. The two then looked back and saw that their classmates and year group were barely halfway through. Both took notice of the giant slide of ice that was actually crushing through pillars and the explosions that decimated anything in their way. Looks like we'll have company soon enough. Indeed. Let's move on up. We'll have a final race near the end. Sounds good? Right. Tenya nodded as they headed out the tunnel. And in a stunning display of stunts and daredevil attitudes, Midoriya and Ida take a joint first place in the second part of the race. They're now the first ones to make it to the final obstacle. They both stopped as they stared at the large coliseum-like area in front of them. The last kilometer-worth obstacle was covered in odd hexagons. The area was wide as well, and both were suddenly very wary. It's the arena. Izuku and Tenya stared warily at each other before making their way across the arena. So far, no traps had been activated, which left them even more wary. Boom! 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 Deku! The two quickly turned to see Bakugo racing towards them with his explosions. A sudden chill reached them as a path of ice was then carving its way towards them, Todoroki at its helm. Behind them, the various students were making their way out of the tunnel. Both of them realized why the traps hadn't activated till then. Don't think that you'll beat me. Wait, don't. The entire arena suddenly rumbled as the hexagons surged and waved beneath their feet. As if an earthquake was taking place right then and there, pillars started to shoot into the sky, one impacting Bakugo directly and sending him into the air, another breaking apart Todoroki's ice, and a third hitting Izuku and Tenya and sending them flying away from each other. Soon enough, entire waves of pillars were shooting into the sky, sending students flying all over the place. Be careful, though. Things are more than meets the eye. Now he tells us. As the students did their best to make their way across the arena, the crowd actually started to laugh at the admittedly hilarious sight. That pissed off quite a few of them, actually. One in particular was especially so. If Bakugo's mood could be described in one word right now, it would be apoplectic, and even then it would be an understatement. Not only had Half and Half completely ignored him for Deku, but Deku's words still struck him from earlier. Him? Be the new number one? That was a direct challenge if he ever saw it, and there wasn't any way that he would let Deku nor any of his extra friends or any of those damn clones get in his way. Then there was the fact that before he could fully conquer the wall, it had suddenly opened, because enough people had made it through. In other words, a handicap. Then there was the complete horse crap that Deku and Glasses were doing with Ponytail, along with the rest of his extra friends. This was a competition. Why in the world would they work together? What was the point? Bakugo didn't deign to think about it more as he made his way over the pillars, even unleashing explosions large enough to break them. He would win. He was Bakugo Katsuki. He was going to be the next number one hero. No fancy speeches, no teamwork, no Deku would stand in his way. Because that's what heroes do. Win. And that was all that mattered. Elsewhere, Izuku and Tenya noticed that Bakugo was flying overhead, dodging as best he could and destroying where he couldn't. Damn it. I need to reach him. I need to win. Izuku, May I ask why this is so important to you? Is this still about your personal history with Bakugo? Hell no, I don't give a damn what he thinks about me, but I made a promise to two people, Tenya, that I'd win and show the world that I am here, Izuku said as they ran for a small, clear stretch. Quickly dodging a pillar that jumped out, Tenya continued the conversation. Django and All Might. Izuku stumbled slightly before gulping and nodding. Tenya was a bit awed by what seemed to be a growing personal relationship between the symbol of peace and who might potentially be his successor. Yeah, for them. For all the VOD who lost their lives. For my mom. For all the people that are gonna need saving. I want to give them hope that no matter what happens, the torch will still be carried. Tenya briefly hopped to the side, and he absent-mindedly noticed a sudden drop in temperature as Todoroki then decided to make an arch of ice to make his way over as well. And there goes Todoroki. Crap. Do you really believe that All Might will retire soon? All Might's been at this for at least 30 years, Tenya. It will come in our generation. At that, Tenya's mind blanked as he realized that it was true. All Might really had been a hero for 3 decades. The majority of heroes usually lasted for around a decade at most. Powerful heroes like the top 100 usually hit too because of experience and admittedly luck, avoiding crippling injuries, and staying on top of finances having a hand, among other factors. Very few managed to make pro-heroism an actual career. Some notable exceptions being Endeavor, Yoroimusha, and of course, All Might. And once he did retire, crime would rise almost immediately. People would be stricken with fear. Whoever took the number 1 spot would have to shoulder that burden. The burden of number 1 is a great one, Izuku, Tenya muttered as they made their way forward. It's not number 1 I'm after, Tenya. I don't care about the rankings. What I want is to be that symbol for the people. To be the one that they can depend on. I want villains to know me, and fear to ever dare come out of the shadows.
Ah, Shigaraki.
Tenya mused to himself about how the villains that had attacked them were reacting to Izuku's speech. Probably not very well he took it. But more importantly, I want the people to see me and my brothers and be filled with peace and hope. That no matter what happens, we will protect them. Tenya smiled softly. Well then, I guess it's good that I'm friends with you, Izuku. I want to be a part of the beginning for the new symbol of hope, Tenya said as he grasped Izuku's arm. Wait, what? Whoa. Tenya pushed himself to the limit as he grabbed Izuku and dragged him over to Ochako. Ochako now? Right. Head to Momo after. She yelled as she activated her quirk on Izuku, who now found himself weightless. What's happening? Izuku yelled as he was dragged around the arena again. Ochako clinging on to Tenya. Ochako and I spoke with each other earlier after hearing your speech. We both want to do our best in this festival, but as much as it pains us to admit it, the chances of either of us winning is slim to none. That's so not true. Appreciated, but it is true, which is why we decided, when the time is right, we'd help you along the way. Tenya said as he found Momo, who had seen him coming and had been preparing something special. That's right, Izuku. You've got a lot ahead of you. You've done so much for us as class president, risking your life, losing your brothers. I want to pay some of that back. And if I can help kickstart your journey to become a symbol of hope for the people, then I want to. Guys, this isn't Dash. Izuku tried to interrupt before Tenya grabbed his face as Momo strapped something to him. You don't understand. We believe in you, Izuku. Me, Ochako, Yuga, Kyoka, and now Momo, who I'm guessing was told the plan by Ochako. He trailed off while looking at her. Momo nodded as she made some final preps. Ochako found the others a while ago, relayed them the plan. They should all know the signal. Signal? What in the world did you all plan? Izuku asked as he floated in the air with his arms crossed, slightly annoyed but also touched. So win this, Izuku, not only for those you mentioned before, but for all of us that choose to believe in you now, understand? Tenya asked with a grin. Izuku was struck speechless at the intensity of it, but nodded his head. I will the VOD, for Django, the others, my family, and for all of you. I'll win. Good, because right now you're a bit behind, so let us help you. Momo then pulled something else out of her body, pointed it to the air, and fired. A bright green flare shot into the sky, catching the attention of all. What's this? Yaoyorozu shoots a flare into the sky. What does she have up her sleeve now? And what's going on with Midoriya's little group of friends? Kyuka had reached the group and planted her jacks into the ground, sending her strongest attack into it. The vibrations rumbled through the pillars still on the ground, damaging machinery and causing them to get stuck in front of them. Tenya quickly activated his quirk and jumped into the sky. Ochako's quirk allowing him to get some serious air. Grabbing Izuku by the back of his uniform, he started to spin with his quirk and slingshot Izuku towards the end of the arena. What's this? Ida throws Midoriya towards the end. Pillars started to rise, but were quickly cut down by acid and lasers. I admit I wasn't really into this plan. I want to win, so you owe me, Prez. Ishido yelled with a grin as she made her way forward. I stand by you, Mon Ami, but still, you owe me as well. Izuku chuckled to himself as he silently thanked them. Momo's contraption then activated, giving him more acceleration and rocketing him towards the tunnel at the end of the arena. I can't believe it. Midoriya's friends are actually helping him make it to first. What kind of show is this? Eraser, Cody, your thoughts? No tricks here, present Mike. Just what appears to be pure loyalty and friendship. They can't all win, so might as well help one of them make it. Midoriya inspired them with his speech earlier, and as their class president, he's already got a lot of their support. We may see more surprises yet. As he sped forward, practically flying towards the finish, he spotted Todoroki and Bakugo arguing and fighting as they tried to also make their way to the end zone. With a grin as he felt his gravity return to him, he charged one for all once more as he started to fall in front of them. This is totally going to leave me sore, but I want to win. I have to win. I can't let their actions be in vain. He thought as he cranked it up to 20%, and with a slam, he crashed into the edge of the arena right in front of the door and right in front of the two fighters. The ensuing impact caused the machinery to pop out dozens of pillars behind him and absolutely decimate anything near him, including the pillars that led into the tunnel. As his knees were bent, time seemed to stop for a moment as he angled himself and pushed off, the resulting debris becoming shotgun pellets for the other two contestants that they quickly felt. Spearing himself forward in the air and through the tunnel, he soon landed and ran normally the rest of the way, the bright light at the end of the tunnel getting ever closer. And folks, the winner of the obstacle race, Class A's rockin' leader. With a smile, he burst through the ribbon as the crowd roared in approval. Midoriya Izuku. With tears poking the corners of his eyes, he panted with a sheer grin on his face. As he faced the stands to where his mother and All Might were, the latter met his eyes and nodded. Izuku proudly stuck his fist into the air, proudly declaring his resolve. I am here, Django, he whispered under the roar of the crowd. All Might was filled with pride as he held onto a crying Inko, the latter cheering loudly at her baby boy's victory. The sports festival is usually a competition where they have to aim for the top, even if it means defeating their friends and classmates. All Might thought as more and more students made their way into the tunnel toward the finish line. Modern heroes usually depend a lot on their popularity, so they need to have that desire to stand above others. Students were finally breaking free into the main stage, the crowd applauding each new arrival. But you, my boy, while having that desire, have also instead inspired those around you, albeit unintentionally, and they in turn have decided to support you. As he watched Izuku suddenly be barreled over by his friends and be the unfortunate victim of a dogpile, Toshinori contemplated something that he never would have thought. Perhaps with this new generation, it is not a singular pillar that is needed. As Izuku gave off the brightest smile that Toshinori had seen in weeks, he smiled softly in approval and anticipation. Perhaps it needs more. Bakugo was panting and clutched his arm, his eyes shaking with rage. Again, damn it again. He wildly stared at Izuku who, now with his friends, raised his fist high once more. The crowd cheered in approval for him. It was a mockery. Todoroki, on the other hand, merely stared silently at Midoriya, his eyes narrowing in their own frozen anger and discontent. Midoriya. He clenched his right fist. I will prove myself against you. Stepping off, he let him celebrate his victory. Soon enough the tables would turn. As we prepare for the next challenge, please enjoy our little interlude. Mike screamed as he eagerly anticipated what was coming next. Turning off the mic, he then turned towards Cody. So can you please tell me what's going on? 'Cause we haven't really done an interlude between the first and second events before. I want to know. Mike begged as Aizawa rolled his eyes. Cody merely grinned as he jokingly shook his finger. Going to have to wait like the rest of them. Nizu and Aizawa know though. What? Shota. Shut up, Mike. Why, Cody? Aizawa groaned. By the way, Izuku, have you noticed your clones? They're circling around the stadium. What? True enough, they were. It was an odd formation. He didn't know why, however. Wait, are those my parents? Kyoka asked as she spotted her mother with one of her largest drums. Her father was right next to her along with some of his friends. What in the world? It started abruptly, and it was powerful, startling everybody in the stadium as they all looked towards the source of the beat. Tong.
Sa. Rang.
From around him, throughout the stadium, the clones were chanting, slamming their fists on their armor in a rhythmic tempo following Kyoka's mother who surprisingly enough was on the enormous drum. Broka.
Yete isekartea.
A staccato of cracks.
Dha verda fada aden tratu.
Mustafesu kendosi atu.
Yewem emroteja seateja nauteja seneria. Gratua kunet sudralsia.
Cody gave a loud, stirring battle cry from the announcer's box as the rhythm continued. Hoo-hoo. Hoo-hoo.
Kom. Hu. Hu.
RK. Tsad. Hoo-hoo. Droten.
Troch. Hau. Hau.
Inwayan. Yours. Hoo-hoo. Aden.
Dha verda fada aden tratu.
Hoo-hoo. Hoo-hoo. Mustafesu kendosi atu. Hoo-hoo. Hoo-hoo.
Yewem emroteja seateja nauteja seneria.
Hoo-hoo. Hoo-hoo.
Gratua kunet sudralsia.
Hoo-hoo. Hoo-hoo. Tong. The drums continued to roar as the clones beat their armor to the tempo. All around them the crowd marveled at the show they were getting. When did they? Izuku's mouth had dropped of sheer incredulity. One of Kyotaro's friends had even pulled out a wind instrument that accompanied the tune wonderfully, and from the background, horns that sounded like the beginnings of war.
Dha verda fada aden tratu.
Hoo-hoo. Hoo-hoo. Mustafesu kendosi atu. Hoo-hoo. Hoo-hoo.
Yewem emroteja seateja nauteja seneria.
Hoo-hoo. Hoo-hoo.
Gratua kunet sudralsia.
Hoo-hoo. Hoo-hoo. The horns began, chilling everybody to their bones. Tong.
Dha verda fada aden tratu.
Hoo-hoo. Hoo-hoo. Mustafesu kendosi atu. Hoo-hoo. Hoo-hoo.
Yewem emroteja seateja nauteja seneria.
Hoo-hoo. Hoo-hoo.
Gratua kunet sudralsia.
Hoo-hoo. Hoo-hoo. Tong. Kote. Hoo. A series of smaller drums, in constant militaristic tune with a small assortment of strings playing in the background.
Kandosi sakarota. Vode an.
Flutes rising in the background. Mustafesu Aiden. Mhivodean.
Bolkote.
Darajuum kote.
Yorso. Kandoato. Sakiram neutra cincade. Vode an.
Hoo-hoo, 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 hoo-hoo. The war song ended and the crowd started to roar in approval, the intensity firing them up even more. Many students found themselves suddenly intimidated. Midoriya had managed to place first just through the energy part of his quirk. How much more powerful would he have been had he been allowed to use his clones? More than one hero in the crowd also had similar thoughts, wondering as to the potential of the future hero before them who had so daringly proclaimed his intention to replace All Might. Some of the older, wiser ones secretly were thankful that such a force was on the side of good rather than evil. All Might had a silly grin on his face as he stared at Inko, who was breathing heavily, her own angelic voice joining her son's as she sang the war song like the goddess her sons were comparing her to. Mitsuki was quick to notice and had an impish grin on her face, but decided to bide her time until the moment was right. That was amazing. Oh, I definitely have to do something for the gyros now. Elsewhere, Nizu was secretly watching with his tablet and smirking with dark amusement. Quite a number of people had protested Midoriya's very involvement in the sports festival after the events of the USJ. A small number had even demanded his expulsion, afraid of his potential. Too much, they said, that it was unnecessary for heroes to kill.
Silly humans.
So naive, so willing to live behind their ivory towers and pay no heed to the troubles of those below them. So content with their illusion of peace, unwilling to make the hard decisions. As much as Nizu admired All Might and considered him a friend, he had to admit that the peace that he established, while good in the short term, had many negative consequences for the long term. People were complacent. Heroes, barring a few exceptions, were complacent. And all of them were blind to the rot that was festering in their society. Already he'd had to fend off the commission. They had also seen Midoriya and his clone's potential, but he would die before they turned him into another Hawks. They were unafraid of his potential, rather seeking how to fully exploit it. However, it is more than likely that Midoriya, with his endless sense of virtue and compassion and love, would fall into darkness and become something far darker than Nagant. A personal failure of Nizu's, one that he regretted every day. He refused to repeat his mistakes. So again, a compromise was made between the multiple parties involved. Midoriya could participate in the festival, but to prevent allegations of cheating, and to further see his potential when given a disadvantage, would not be allowed the use of his clones during the events. Nothing was said about brotherly support, however. When Nizu had brought it up to Midoriya, he had no doubt that the boy would take the circumstances given to him and succeed, and the boy had quickly agreed, promising to meet Nizu's expectations. But this? Inspiring others to help him win in what was considered the greatest free-for-all in Japan? This was beyond Nizu's expectations, and it was exciting. Izuku Midoriya, successor of All Might, and if your friends are correct, the future symbol of hope. He saw Izuku raise his fist once more as the VOD finished their song. You will certainly bring change to this society. What that change will be, however, is yet to be determined. Everybody, a round of applause for the Kyoka band and the VOD for their wonderful performance. If you want to see more, just wait till our next break. Now, on to you, Midnight. Alright then, kiddies. It's time for our next event. The first 42 to have passed will make it through the next round. But don't worry if you didn't make it. We've got plenty of chances for you to shine. Midnight said while licking her lips. Next comes the real challenge, and all you reporters are in for a treat. So, give it your all. She yelled while raising her riding crop, the board behind her blurring through options again. Now for the next game. I already know what it is, but what could it be? What could it be? She teased while meeting Izuku's eyes. He slightly shuddered, just knowing that it was going to be bad news. Here we go. It's Dash. The board stopped on a picture of little animated people inside a vehicle. A very recognizable one.
Tankwa. Tankwa.
A few gasped, some not even knowing how to play. It's simple. This will be a team event. That shouldn't be hard for a few of you already. You'll divide into teams of 3 to 4. The arena will be separated into vertical stages, the top being a hill. The goal? Knock out the enemy teams and rack up the most points. If you get shot, the team who shot you gets the points. The last 4 teams with the most points get to move on. Midnight explained as a series of images on the screen explained the game. The hill suddenly highlighted. This game also has a twist. We decided to mix it with King of the Hill. If you manage to stay at the top without being blasted off for a full minute, your points triple. But if you get knocked off before that minute, a small animation of a tank falling and their point counter going to 0, you lose everything. At that, the students murmured once more, realizing the serious gambit. Either lose your points or practically secure your spot into the next round. Each team will have points based on their result in the race. Oh, so like the entrance exam, I can get behind that. In other words, teams are dependent on their players. That's so cool. Midnight whipped her crop, slightly annoyed at the constant interruptions. Starting from 42nd, we have 5 points, with each place higher gaining 5 more. However, first place gets a special reward. Izuku immediately felt Nizu's hand in this. First place has a point value of 10 million points. Izuku's heart froze as the weight of the words suddenly fell on him. He could feel the stares of the students on him and the immense pressure of how serious it had suddenly gotten. For a moment, he was frozen, but he was snapped out of his fear as he heard chanting from the clones. VOD, VOD, VOD. He smirked. VOD, he whispered. He popped his neck and his fingers. Well, if it's a challenge you want, then I hope you don't disappoint in turn. Elsewhere above, All Might nodded in approval, seeing that Izuku's confidence had returned and understanding that Izuku knew the true meaning behind such a ridiculous point value. The burden of being number one, of being the symbol of peace, is a heavy one, my boy. This is but a taste of it, he thought as he comforted a panicking Inko. I can only hope that by the time you take my place, you are ready. And on another note, here at UA, we always try to make things plus ultra, so for this challenge, you won't pick your teams. At that, half the students panicked, each worrying about how they were going to handle this. The other half, however, just like our class, and just like the USJ, everything is random. We don't get a choice in who we fight with, only in how we finish the fight. Tenya thought as he sternly nodded his head. The others in his class had similar thoughts as they readied themselves. Using a randomizer, here are your teams. Team 1, Midoriya, Komori, Shiozaki, Uraraka. Team 2, Bondo, Rin, Tsunatori, Hananuki. Team 3, Todoroki, Shuji, Yanagi, Kuda. Team 4, Azui, Ishido, Siro, Jairu. Team 5, Kurwaro, Tokoyami, Ojiro, Kodai. Team 6, Shinso, Kaibara, Mineta, Tsuburaba. Team 7, Hatsum, Kamakiri, Shishida. Team 8, Sato, Kirishima, Tokeage, Hagakure. Team 9, Yaoyorozu, Kendo, Yuga. Team 10, Shota, Fukudashi, Ida. Team 11, Bakugo, Monoma, Tetsu, Aways. Izuku breathed deeply as they were all dismissed towards their respective spots. Meeting Ochako's gaze, he smiled. Well, at least I still got you. She smiled brightly and nodded before the two faced their new allies. So, Izuku, what's the plan? Author. And that's a wrap. I know, another cliffhanger. But I felt that this would be a good place to stop. Fortunately, I won't be busy for the next couple of weeks after comp, so yeah. Also, yes, I used a randomizer and I still got Bakugo and Monoma on the same team. Eesh. On that note, thank you all for your support. We've hit over 30k views, 460 favorites, 533 followers, and 130 reviews. I'd really like to hit 200 soon. So if you see this story, review. Give me your feedback. Write an omake. I'd love to see ideas that y'all have too. Now that I mention it. Omake time. Darth Kyofu. An idea I've had running around for a while, but recently re-inspired by Unlawful Gentlemen. They had finally managed it. It had taken over 24 heroes, including Mirio with One for All, but they had beaten Darth Kyofu, the scourge of Japan for the last decade. Killer of heroes and villains alike, including All for One, his former master, and Shigaraki, his former rival. And Mirio had questions for him. The armored man stood silently behind the plasma gate to his cell, not a sound coming out of him except for the horrendous mechanized breathing that came out of his respirator. His black armor, once pristine, reminiscent of a dark samurai, was now tattered and marred, a testament to the brutal battle that had taken place. His helmet's infamous prongs to mock All Might had been torn off, one taller than the other. But still he remained calm. It was odd, but Mirio had other questions in mind. Lemillion. Kyofu. You have questions? A moment of silence as Mirio tried to rein in his turbulent emotions. This topic was personal. Why? You will have to be more specific. Why her? Why Eri? She was once an innocent little girl, and you turned her into that monster. My apprentice was not innocent when I found her. Her father's death was an accident. Mirio snarled as his quirk briefly flared, a hint of pain appearing on his face. Calm yourself, Lemillion. It would be wise not to strain yourself. Besides, I referenced not that incident, but rather the innocence that was torn from her by overhaul. Kyofu said his memories returned to his mind, of the abomination that he'd found. Overhaul, I saw what you did to him, to the shy Hasakai. Those monsters deserved no mercy. And what about the countless heroes you've killed? Merely obstacles that stubbornly stood in my way. Mirio snorted before returning back to the topic at hand. But why take her? Why create such a monster yourself? She's killed dozens. Kyofu stood silent for a moment, his masked face turning away from Mirio. He'd always hated it, as it hid his expressions, but apparently he needed it to stay alive. Since he turned away from him, however, Mirio liked to think that he was feeling at least a modicum of shame. I found a child, like me, abandoned by the world. So I transformed her into strength. Mirio growled before turning away, his emotions too high to not do something foolish. I admire your idealism, Tagada Mirio. Once, I was the same. Out of that respect, I will tell you now. Give up one for all, and let it die. Mirio snorted again as he turned to face the imprisoned man. Oh, and what? Give it to somebody like you? Not a chance. You misunderstand, Mirio. I do not desire that curse. Kyofu said as he grasped at his helmet. Curse? A hiss of air, and a whine as the helmet and mask shifted, becoming looser before Kyofu took the whole thing off. Mirio gasped in shock as he took in the other man's appearance. He was bald and horrifically scarred by burns. Some looked like regular burn scars all over his head, but some were patterned, particularly the X that crossed his face, matched with burning, yellow eyes rimmed with crimson. Eyes that were once the brightest shade of emerald. All Might's failed successor. I know all too well what one for all brings to its victims. He rasped. Izuku Midoriya. Omake by Jan Sisu, slightly modified for grammar, editing, etc. Izuku relaxed into his seat as he prepared to eat his lunch, only to be interrupted by a voice in his mind. VOD, there's something you need to see. He frowned, beginning to focus on his mindscape. What is it, Cody? There's been a development with our new siblings. Our brothers? Is everyone okay? Izuku began to follow his brother around in his mind, urgency causing them to move quickly. Everything seems fine. It's just that. He trailed off as they entered a room full of tanks, where their new siblings would appear. Izuku rapidly approached a tank, observing the individual within. There doesn't seem to be anything wrong, Izuku froze, his eyes drifting to a tank on the far side of the room. What? His voice was flat as he began to walk. He slowly approached the tank. Inside a clone floated, with features that were near identical barring a few things. Curly green hair framed a heart-shaped face, with a slightly more slender torso. Thankfully, they were clothed. The most important thing, however, was the addition of certain shapes on her chest. What? Cody, how is this possible? You guys are copies of me. I'm a guy. His arms flailed wildly as he gestured to the girl in the tank. Cody shrugged, but unease flickered in his gaze as he looked at his creator. We don't get it either, Izuku. They just showed up last night, but they aren't awake yet. At this point, Heavy could no longer resist. Maybe you've discovered another part of yourself, Izuku. He gave a sly smile. Perhaps we should go shopping, get some prettier clothes, maybe a nice pink dress? It's not like that, Heavy. He snapped in annoyance. While he personally sympathized for those who struggled with LGBTQ, but he did not share in their struggle personally. However, he remained bewildered by this turn in events, something which his classmates shared when the clones eventually woke up. It was a few weeks later when the League of Villains attacked and Izuku was forced to once again summon the clone army. Everything changed when the Sisterhood finally entered the scene. Wearing light armor, they marched out of the portal, every bit as professional as their brothers. Jiro was the first to notice, eyes narrowing as she tried to figure out why they seemed so different to the others. Are those clones female? Everyone froze at her words. Hero and villain alike stared, before their heads whipped around to stare at Izuku. What the hell, Deku? I thought they were your copies. Bakugo shouted, explosions rocketing from his palms as he stared incredulously. Izuku avoided everyone's gaze as the stares continued. Special Infantry Unit reporting for duty. At this call, the battle resumed, with the new addition allowing for the capture of multiple villains. However, even as they were being led away, their gazes followed Izuku and his new recruits. When things calmed down, Izuku was bombarded with questions. Eventually, he activated One for All just to escape for a while. That evening, Cody overheard a discussion between 9 certain people. Do you think we should tell him that it's probably my fault? The voice of Nana was somewhat sheepish as she looked towards the new additions. Another figure gave a deep laugh, leaning backwards slightly. Nah, this is too funny to stop. The kid needs some more fun in his life. Author. Again, thank you for your contribution. I really enjoyed it. If anybody else wants to send me anything, send me it by PM. In case you want to see the lyrics for DHA Word of Verda translated, here's the Midoriya version, with some slightly modified lyrics to better fit this iteration. Don't expect me to change the Mando A version though. I just butcher it. DHA Word of Verda. The ash of the fallen beats strong within the hero's heart. We are the rage of the warriors who fell, the first noble sons of Mustafesu. Let all those who stand before us light the night sky in flame. Our vengeance burns brighter still. The gauntlet of Mustafesu strikes without mercy. We are the rage of the warriors who fell, the first noble sons of Mustafesu. Let all those who stand before us light the night sky in flame. Our vengeance burns brighter still. VOD and glory, one indomitable heart, brothers all. We, the wrath of Mustafesu brothers all. And glory, eternal glory, we shall bear its weight together. Forged like the saber of One for All, brothers all. One indomitable heart, brothers all. We, the wrath of Mustafesu, brothers all. And those who stand before us light the night sky in flame. Our vengeance burns brighter still. Every last traitorous soul shall kneel. Those who stand before us light the night sky in flame. Our vengeance burns brighter still. Every last traitorous soul shall fall. Forged like the saber in One for All, brothers all. Until next time, Ritter CMHI, goodbye.